came to stop the anger of the Wu? Yeah. Tonight we will have a big feast. And then at the end of the feast, you will climb to the top of the big Wu and you will jump in, okay? Okay.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.
Take me to the volcano!
Before we talk about Yellowstone, is there anything that scientists can do to get ahead of one of these supervolcano eruptions? Like, could they drill holes in...
Nothing.
Oh,
a supervolcano is one of the few... There's like a list of 10, massive catastrophic events that could destroy humanity. And a lot of them, like nuclear war and plague, are preventable.
Yeah.
Even an asteroid is preventable if we can come up with the technology to divert it, and which we are. Supervolcanoes, on the other hand, are not preventable. If you were to drill a hole in a magma floor, you would cause a supervolcano to erupt. So you don't want to do that.
Lucky I'm not in charge of this, though.
Right. So really, we can't focus on preventing them. What has to be focused on is surviving. What do we do afterwards? Because it's not just the event. It's not just the 2-3 weeks that caldera is going to be spewing ash and exploding, because that's how long supervolcanoes can last. I mean, we're not talking about a 1-day, 1-hour event. We're talking about over days, sometimes weeks, of constant eruption until the floor collapses in the final big burst. But it's what happens after that. It's the amount of ash that's deposited, how widespread it is, the destruction to agriculture and drinkable water, people dying from breathing in ash because it's nothing but tiny shards of glass. So it's all of the after effects, really, that would do us in. The main event will kill everybody in its path.
Yeah.
But it's what happens afterwards.
Yeah, it's knowing how to survive that sort of thing. And
famine. If you think about it, political anarchy. And that's one of the things my dad and I really were interested in. What would happen? There would be no government. Any kind of structure and organization and infrastructure would be non-existent.
You do make a good point in the book that if there is the ash in the drinking water, that people should just leave the water and the ash will settle down. I'm glad I picked that up from the book. Well, I guess take us through sort of the scenario, how we could expect this sort of thing to play out.
We did a scenario with Long Valley, and we started it with an eruption on the San Andreas. So we got that in there. And basically, to keep it short so people can get the visual gist of it, you would have a massive earthquake on the southern San Andreas, and that would trigger a series of earthquakes around the Long Valley caldera. And over time, they would build to the point where there was just so much stress that you then began to have the vents opening. And magma, you'll have signs and signals of something big coming. Scientists point to what's called harmonic tremor, and that is the movement of magma between the caldera floor, and that is a surefire sign that something is going on. It's not necessarily a surefire sign that there's going to be a super eruption, but 9 times out of 10, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what will happen is this sort of buildup of pressure, and there will be a lot of seismic activity, and you'll have vents opening up, and they will begin the series of eruptions. And you'll have everything and anything spewing out of those vents, and eventually, over days or weeks, the caldera rim will become so compromised and weak because of all of those vents blowing holes through the floor. And all of the magma will be released from the chamber, that you then have the final collapse of the caldera floor. And that pretty much ends the event itself. But now you've got all of that ash, hitting the jet stream and traveling all across the northern hemisphere, blacking out the sky for days, weeks, months, causing a mini ice age that could go on for years. In the case of Toba, it's estimated it lasted at least 6 years. Eventually, that ash goes into the southern hemisphere and begins to do damage there to agriculture, to drinkable water, food sources. We, in America, we have the grain belt here. That would be destroyed. Travel routes would be shut down. There would be no importing of product. There would be no exporting of product. Governments would just pretty much be non-functioning or functioning at an extremely low emergency level. You would have people rioting, trying to find shelter. emergency care, food, water. You know, I mean, you think you can pretty much imagine how that would play out. And the event itself would have been over a long time ago.
How widespread would the area affected be? And I know you said the ash would be up in the jet stream, but like here in Boston, would it just be, you know, really cold?
Well, you know, there's some imaging that's been done that shows, you know, how much ash would be, maybe, you know, 10 inches here in this region.
Yeah.
Well, eventually the entire globe would be affected. I mean, we're talking about global climate change. We're not just talking about regional.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the ash itself, of course, like in Long Valley, it's estimated that, you know, it would be maybe 20 centimeters thick right in that immediate zone, 5 centimeters thick, maybe 500 miles out. But you have to understand something. Even a percentage of a centimeter of a layer of ash can shut down airports, can destroy crops, can poison the soil, not to mention the fact that if it's breathed in by anything alive, you've got problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So even though your ashfall in Boston, you're going to see it, you're going to notice it, you're going to notice the sky, definitely. But say you lived in Italy, or better yet, say you lived in New Zealand, because that's in the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to notice it right away, but eventually you are going to see that the sky has a different cast to it, that it's colder, you know, the sun isn't shining the way it used to. And a lot of the gases that are in the air last for a very long time, too. The sulfuric acid that's released causes the UVB rays to get to us in a way that they normally don't, because it causes damage to the ozone layer. So you're going to see skyrocketing increases in skin cancer. So, yeah, you're better off in Boston than me in San Diego. But ultimately, when 6 months pass and you don't have a job because the economy has just been crippled, there's no Wall Street, you know, food is like so short that people are killing each other over it. That's where you're going to see the most after effects.
Almost like a Katrina situation on a national scale.
Well, on a global. Because, again, we're so locked into what we import and export, and countries depend on us for grain, and we depend on China for everything.
Yeah.
So if cargo routes are shut down, if air travel is shut down for weeks because of the ash in the air, which can shut down a plane engine, everybody's going to go into the grocery store and see very little on those shelves. I mean, there's just going to be so many different things that people are going to have to deal with that they've never had to deal with before.
Yeah, kind of like what happened with New Zealand in this scenario. It's also a situation where if the caldera were to blow in, you know, Asia or something, we'd still be pretty badly affected by it, even though we would. Yeah, maybe. Ash.
Yeah, I mean, if New Zealand, you know, obviously the southern hemisphere will get the brunt, but because of the jet streams and the air circulation routes, eventually it does make it into the other hemisphere. And with the super volcanoes in question, we're talking Long Valley and Yellowstone, those are both in the northern hemisphere. And most commerce, most of the population, the urban centers, they're in the northern hemisphere. So it would just be, and, you know, the most powerful governments are in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
So that would cause a lot of problems that I don't even think we can imagine. I do know that there are plans being discussed as to what would happen and how it would be handled. But, you know, we don't have anything to reference because all we've had to deal with are things like 9/11 and Katrina, which, though tragic, could be considered regional.
Yeah, and poorly handled by the government.
Oh, gosh.
Part,
I mean, I was just going to say, you know, look how they handled Katrina. You think they're going to handle what was just described?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bad scene. Is there a timetable on this sort of thing, or is it sort of like from now to, you know, 100 years from now it could happen? I mean,
you know, nature is on her own timetable. I mean, even with the San Andreas, I've lived in L.A. and San Diego. I've lived in Southern California for a long time. And I cannot tell you how many times they've warned us, you know, that there's activity and, oh, it's going to blow, go get your 3 days worth of water. And then 5 more years go by. There's no way to know except by watching the signs. Is there increased activity around the area? You know, is the magma really moving? What's going on? And we we've got monitoring systems that are working on this 24/7, so it's not like we won't have any warning. But we still don't know when that actual moment would occur where the Earth just says, that's it. I'm blowing this magma out of here.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with earthquakes. I mean, who knew that Reno was going to be going, and Indiana, I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah. And like you point out, even no matter how prepared we are, we still have to deal with the after effects of that situation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
What can people do to prepare themselves for that sort of thing? Is there even much you can do other than the basic sort of, emergency supply type situation?
I think, with supervolcanoes, probably the best thing is the basics and then some. Because they always tell you with the basics, have 3 days worth or 72 hours worth of water. Well, that ain't going to cut it when you're not going to be able to get food and fresh water for possibly weeks.
Yeah. Maybe
even months. The thing is that you have to kind of balance the possibility of that happening with other concerns. Not everybody can afford to go out and stock up 6 months worth of fresh water and dried food and have a dome shelter that they can live in to stay out of the ash. So certainly I think people everywhere should always have emergency kits, because look what's happening. I mean, we've got tornadoes and all kinds of stuff going on and going into areas that they never had before. But you cannot prepare for something like that unless you live out in the boonies and you have your own food and water supply and, again, some type of shelter. And so what is more important, to focus on that or to try to pay your bills and keep your house?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. Like you said, you have to balance that. Otherwise, you're the kook in the building his own bomb shelter or something.
We could get hit by an asteroid before then, or have somebody go nuts and have a nuclear war. It's good to know that supervolcanoes exist, especially if you live near one. But I do not think anybody should be wasting their time, stressing over what's going to happen, because it could be another 100,000 years before any one of them erupts.
Yeah.
And it could be tomorrow. And you know what? If it's tomorrow, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. It's like that old, if it's your time to go, it's your time to go, I guess.
Yeah, you just do your best.
Well, where can people pick up supervolcano? I have other questions for you about other stuff, but we're kind of wrapping up the supervolcano discussion.
Supervolcano, online. It's in every brick and mortar bookstore, anywhere books are sold.
Nice, and look for it in the science section, because that's what it says on the back of the book.
Yeah, actually, I found one yesterday in the nature section of Barnes & Noble. So, yeah, science, nature.
Just ask the people that work there; they'll find it for you.
Somebody said they found one in history, which I thought was. They had a good point, but I don't know.
It's always up to the one guy who takes it out of the box, I think. He probably makes the decision.
Exactly.
But, yeah, anywhere books are sold and online, people can grab it. It's a great book. Very well researched. I got to put you over for that. You and your dad did a great job.
Thank you.
Just amazingly well researched and tremendously detailed. Just a great book and worth reading for anyone who's interested in this whole supervolcano stuff that seems to have really picked up steam, no pun intended, in the last few years.
Yeah, I think maybe we wrote it just in time, huh?
I think, it worked out pretty well for you guys. Now, before we move on to the other stuff, how long has this, Yellowstone popularity, I guess you could say, been going on? This is the last question I guess I have. It sort of just popped into my head. But it seems like I didn't really hear about it until, the last couple of years ago. Has this been something they've known about for a while, and it just started breaking into the mainstream, or is this a relatively new discovery, if you will?
Scientists have been looking at it for a while because of the activity of the past and because of the activity that's occurring now. But, it's the media. It's the Sci-Fi Channel, the History Channel, Discover. It's all of these. I love all these cable channels. But, they are looking for natural disaster programming, and so they've been focusing on Yellowstone because nobody ever really knew about Long Valley until this study. Well, our book came out, and this study came out linking it to the San Andreas Fault. I mean, of course, scientists knew, but the media hadn't picked up on it yet, and they still haven't, which surprises me. With Toba, when my dad and I started writing the book, all of a sudden there were a couple of Discovery Channel documentaries. So it takes a while, But the scientists get the stuff first, then the media catches hold of it, and then the public.
Seems to be the way it is with all this stuff. All right. Well, definitely, folks, check out Super Volcano wherever fine books are sold, wherever regular books are sold, and wherever all books are sold, and online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the great online booksellers, the publishers, New Page Books. And now the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is something we didn't get a chance to discuss when I had you on the show last time, but it is something I do enjoy talking about, and that's women in the field of the esoteric or paranormal field, if you will. And as I said in the introduction, you're definitely one of the preeminent women in the field, and I don't want to qualify it just like that. You're definitely one of the preeminent researchers in the field of the paranormal. But why do you think it is that there seems to be so few prominent women in the field of the paranormal? I mean, obviously there are a lot of women in the field, but it seems like it's predominantly dominated by men.
You know, this is the weird thing. When I was younger, I was really into the occult when I was a teenager, and Wicca and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, and I'm in my 40s, so at the time, women were doing this. Men, guys, not so much. And then it sort of died down, and the UFO phenomena came full force, and that was sort of a masculine area of study. I was out there with MUFON, but it was 90% guys. And I think what happened is, because I know of hundreds and hundreds of ghost hunting groups and researchers, and the vast majority of them are women.
Yeah, I know.
But the well-known ones, the ones who get the TV shows, or have their own radio shows, tend to be guys. And I'm not sure why that is, because I think women have a natural affinity for the unknown because we're more right brain. But in my case, as a writer, I think I'm allowed to take risks that some men and women in the paranormal field cannot take.
Yeah.
If you have a guy who's a ghost hunter, or he runs an investigatory group or whatever, or a woman, they can't necessarily get into some of the theories and things that I'm allowed to as a writer, because they have a certain mode of thinking that they represent. And what I've noticed about a lot of these groups is that they do really tend to operate inside of a very small box.
Yeah.
And it's only the writers, or the ones that choose to write, that are able to take the risks and start talking about quote-unquote other things. And, I've never had a problem doing that. And with science, I knew that there were people writing books like that, like Dean Radin, but they were scientists. Nobody in the paranormal was talking about quantum physics that I knew of. And I thought, well, I'm in the field, but I'm also on the outside.
Yeah, that's the best place to be.
That's what gave me the advantage. I can go off and write a book about a frog infestation, and go right back next year and write another paranormal book. I'm allowed to do that. But if you're a paranormal investigator, you really are living in a very small box, and sometimes it's hard to break out of it.
Yeah. Now, do you think that's an effect of the field itself, or just? Oh, okay.
Well, I really am. I get a little sick with all these quote unquote ghost hunting shows on TV, because my partner on my next book runs an organization. He'll kill me if I call him a ghost hunter, but that's really not what he is. He's a very scientific person. And he has told me time and time again, and I know he told you when you interviewed him, they have, 7-8 hours of doing nothing.
Yeah.
And things don't always happen. And on a vast majority of investigations, nothing happens. But the media has picked up on it and made it look like such a glamorous thing. Now you're being inundated with people who are calling themselves researchers and investigators. And it's tainting the field. It's a real challenge for the groups that are more science-oriented. And I think for women in general, you may be interested in science, but nobody's going to listen to you because you are a woman who's interested in science. That's very difficult.
Yeah.
I broke out of that because, I wrote a book. I mean, I really think that's probably the only thing that got me above the fray, so to speak, is that I just decided to sit down and write a book.
Now, I know you were involved in, like you said, you were involved with MUFON in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. It seems like women in ufology is an even more scarce situation, and the prominent women who are in ufology, they seem to be the victims of a lot of, they seem to be more scrutinized than the men.
You're being nice.
Yeah.
Well, either they're attacked all the time for their ideas, or they're relegated to niche areas of research, like maybe just the abduction scenarios or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. Yeah, there were a lot of guys, but you know what? Not one of them knew any more about what UFOs were than I did.
Exactly.
I mean, and when I moved to San Diego, I started a MUFON chapter with another woman because we couldn't find anybody doing it. So I think women get the job done, but you're right. They tend to get attacked more. You would not believe some of the emails I've gotten focusing on my looks instead of what I wrote about. There's that sexism there. You know, you can't be an attractive woman and have a brain. So, yeah, there's a lot of that out there.
It's really unfortunate. And like you point out, in the field of ufology, it seems like, and there's a lot of great women doing great work, but
you're never going to hear about them.
Yeah, exactly. It's really strange in the sense, you know, we have a lot of female writers that have been all of America, and I try to promote it as much as possible, but it seems just really strange that you could probably count on one hand, maybe you need the other one to name, you know, the prominent female ufologists out there.
Exactly. I mean, I think of Linda Moulton Howe and Yvonne Smith, and I think that I can't even think of any other names off the top of my head right now, but you're right. And the thing is that the men that are out there, and I love men, I'm not bashing men, but they have not been able to come up with any answers any more so than the women. So I don't think that it's, you know, the power of the male intellect supersedes that of the female intellect. I just think it's like in a lot of other fields, it's just good old sexism.
Yeah, and it's also very cliquey in general. So
it is. And actually, yeah, the paranormal community is very cliquey. And again, as a writer, I get to engage in that community, but I also get to engage outside of it because I've seen that clickiness and it really repels me. Like,
yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
No.
It's one of the things that really puts me off about the whole thing, too. As a host of a show, you know, you get the emails from people that want you to have certain people on and don't want you to have other people on, and if they're not part of the in crowd, you know, they get mad at you because, you know, it's ridiculous. It's like high school, like I've said before.
Yeah, and anytime something becomes like high school, like you just said, that's great. You know it's on the downslide. And, you know, another problem is all of these different groups that are out there and I would say 90% of them have no training whatsoever in what they're doing, how to use their equipment, nor do they have a basic understanding of the scientific aspects of what it is they're researching. They're just out there trying to be the ghost chasers. And it's really hurting the field.
It's unfortunate. This big fad of ghost hunting is when the bottom falls out on that, when the bubble bursts, it's going to be ugly, I think.
You know what? But I'll be thrilled.
Oh yeah. So, well, as an observer of it all, I will too.
Yeah, you're right there with me, and I'm just waiting for the bubble to burst because that's when real dialogue will begin, and that's when the few people that really were in there to try to understand the phenomena will continue on, and the rest will go off to the next fad. Who knows what it'll be? You know, water skiing naked. I mean, I don't know, but they're just going to go jump on the next bandwagon, and good riddance.
The sooner the better, in my opinion, because this ghost hunting thing, I'm hoping, it seems like it's kind of starting to peter out a little bit just from oversaturation.
It is. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of the, you know, people that I do respect out there, that it's just reached the tipping point. And if you go on MySpace and look at all that, there's like 800 groups in
ridiculous.
each state.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was telling Larry when we had him on the show that I accidentally found one that was like in my town, and I'm from just a little small town, and it was like, what is this? What is going on here? This is crazy. There's like maybe one haunted place in my whole town.
Exactly.
I don't even know.
And that's why I chose to work with Larry, because he and I hit it off. We have the same ideas about how things should be done, and he, you know, his group has managed to rise above that, and that is difficult because it's more glamorous to just sort of pretend you're, you know, the ghost hunter guys running around and being on camera and having groupies. But Larry is very much into the research. What is going on here? You know, forget the cameras.
And if you're in this whole thing for groupies, forget it. That's money and groupies is the last thing you're going to get.
Money, forget it. Oh, boy. But I love the paranormal field. I've grown up with it. It fascinates me. And as a writer, I get to dabble in it whenever I feel like it. And then when I'm not feeling like it, I can go off and write a book about volcanoes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the good thing about you as a researcher and as a writer that I have a lot of respect for, and same sort of mindset that I've been preaching a lot in the last few months here. Is you can live in the world of the paranormal, but don't live it.
Exactly.
When you walk away, really walk away. Don't spend your whole life involved in this thing, because
it's like living with blinders on.
Exactly. There's so much more of the world out there to enjoy than just the paranormal.
Well, and ironically, every other field of science that I've studied, and I love science, from marine biology to genetics, you will find information that can apply to your paranormal research. If you don't have that well-rounded education, you should not be doing paranormal research.
Exactly. But, try telling that to them.
Oh, please, yeah.
Now, you got another book coming out soon, real soon, actually, because this interview will be posted late May, early June, so it'll be right around the corner now, and that's 2013.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that. It's coming out in July. It's from New Page, right?
New Page Books, 2013, The End of Days or New Beginning, Envisioning the World After the Events of 2012. I am the queen of long subtitles. I've been fascinated with the mythology of 2012. Not just the Mayan calendar mythology that everybody knows about, but the Judeo-Christian concept of Armageddon, and all of this is the idea that we're going to reach technological singularity. And I just wanted to put a book together that pretty much covered every flippin' thing you could think of that has to do with 2012. And in the research came across a million other things, including medical breakthroughs, quantum computing, information technology, all this stuff that is much more realistic in terms of what we might be facing in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Bionics and genetics, longevity research. So the book is sort of half about the Mayan calendar and the idea of an end time and a new transformation of consciousness. And then, most of it is really about things like geopolitical shifts to the east. Are we going to reach peak oil? What's going to happen with the shortage of drinkable water? All these things that we are going to have to face in the next 4 years. We've got emerging diseases like crazy, and nobody's talking about it. So it's kind of like two books in one. And then at the end of the book, I had a lot of amazing people contribute essays as to their vision of the world after 2012. And we got everybody from Whitley Strieber did my foreword. We got Daniel Pinchbeck, Dr. Bob Hieronymus, Edgar Mitchell, this amazing collection of essays in the end that will fascinate people. Nick Redford contributed one.
Nice.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the diverse opinions of what people think will happen or not happen.
It's good that you're putting together a thoughtful book on 2012, because it seems like we're talking about the ghost thing. It seems like this thing's only going to get bigger and crazier as we get closer to 2012.
It is, and there's a lot of kooks out there promoting a lot of really strange ideas. And again, I can't say for sure nothing strange is going to happen, but to me, what was more fascinating is what we can pretty much expect will happen.
Yeah. Based
on, what's happening now.
Exactly. And also you have another book here coming out, and also in the numerical theme,
yes.
1111, and you're going to be co-authoring that with Larry, as you were saying.
Larry. That's our first book, yeah. We're going to be doing a lot of books together. And this is about, 1111 is a time prompt that a lot of people report waking up to or seeing all the time. Mm-hmm. And it was actually my publisher's idea to look into it. He said, see if there's something to this. And I did, and I also found that it really linked to a whole book about signs and sequences and numeric sequences and how there are patterns in nature that we can't explain. So it's really a book about the magic and profound mystery of numbers. And it just blows my mind because, again, it's stuff that people just are not aware of. Is God a number? I mean, can we narrow the creative force down to an actual numeric sequence? And Larry was excited about it, so I asked him if he wanted to do it together as our first book, and he said yes. So
awesome.
It should be really interesting.
When can we expect 1111 to show up? November 11th, maybe?
Yeah, I wish. No, unfortunately, February of 2009.
Okay.
They should have done that. That would have been clever.
So 2-9 then.
Yep.
Awesome. So that'll be in February 2009. I have a feeling we'll have you back for season 4.
I hope
especially
so.
with these 2 books coming out, probably around the same time of year. So you're becoming our springtime tradition, I think.
Hey, I can have the springtime slot.
Yes, definitely. There you go. Well, like I said, Maria, I have just a world of respect for you. I really appreciate your serious-minded research into all things paranormal and not so paranormal, like here with Super Volcano. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while, but we finally got our schedule synced up here.
We're 2 busy people, aren't we?
I know, but luckily it worked out pretty well.
Yes, and it's always a pleasure.
Like I said, and I mean it, I'm not just, kissing your butt here. You're definitely one of the...
Well, thank you.
Definitely one of the preeminent researchers in the field, and we need more grounded, realistic people like you in the world of the paranormal, and less, people that fly off the handle at seeing a light in the sky. So
good to me.
the more Marie D. Jones we have in the paranormal world, the better. That's what I say. So thanks again for coming back on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
That does it for this week's edition of BOA Audio Season 3. Big, super huge thanks to Marie Jones for coming back on the show. You can find out more on Marie Jones at her website, www.mariedjones.com, MarieDJones.com. Check it out. Moving right along, it's time for BOA Audio listener feedback. And this week's letter comes from Rob G. Under the subject line, make a great site better, which is always a nice way to get my attention. The body of the email says, I appreciate your audiophile interviews. I think it would be even better if you included links to the websites your guests promote, and if you included their pictures next to the summary. Keep up the great work, Rob G. Well, there you go. Thanks for writing in, Rob G. I appreciate the feedback. For starters, regarding the pictures of the guests, we used to do that when we first started out during Season 1, but somewhere along the line, in the crush of the deadlines and trying to get the program out on time, it sort of fell between the cracks, if you will, and we stopped doing the pictures of the guests. That's more of a time issue, and just sometimes you just can't find a picture of a guest, so it throws off the whole thing. So after a while, instead of having pictures for some and not for others, we sort of just decided to go with no pictures at all. Regarding the website links, now if you go to the summaries of every interview, the first time the guest is mentioned in the recap, their name is a hard link. It should be a different color, and it'll stand out from the rest of the summary text. That is the link to the guest's website. And of course, we always include links to the guest's website in the bios on the summary page. But I can see what he's talking about. He wants maybe the links and the pictures included in the summary. Something definitely to consider. I've been already sort of putting thought into how we're going to format the Season 4 pages, and maybe we'll bring back pictures for that. I'm not sure, but I'll definitely keep it in mind. Ironically enough, I should also mention that we have gone back and remastered all of the pages for BOA Audio Season 1. Now, if you go back, the pages are pretty much uniform in font size and layout, and included the full show MP3 download link, which wasn't around back when we did Season 1, but I know it's a very popular option for people who want to download the episodes, so we went back and added in the full show MP3 link for all of the Season 1 episodes. So there you have it. Thanks to Rob G for writing in. Of course, there are the 3 great methods to get in touch with me if you want to be a part of listener feedback. Either the email address boa audio@hotmail.com, or the contact button on binnallofamerica.com, or finally join up at the usof.com, the official Binnall of America forum, theusofe.com. Check it out. Lots of great folks at the USOV, always something cooking on the forum. Any of those methods, the website, the email, forum, can get your correspondence into my hands, and then eventually have it make its way to this portion of the program that we call BOA Audio Listener Feedback. Up next, it is the thanks, where we heap praise and kudos onto the outstanding BOA staff. Let me run down the list. Leslie, Chiron, R. Lee, Joe V., Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawkes, and Richard Thomas from Wales. They are the top-notch BOA staff, fresh, enlightening reading material Monday through Friday. We would be a shell of what we are today without their support and insight. So I thank them once again this week for their contributions to the BOA machine. I say it week in and week out, but it's the truth, my friends. If you're only listening to BOA audio and you're not reading the columns at Binnall of America, you're only getting half the story. BOA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. Now comes the part of the show where we ask for your donations. Pretty simple. A program like this costs quite a pretty penny for me. Lengthy long-distance phone calls, a number of them international calls to all over the world, and every call runs at least over an hour. That stuff costs money. The bills, of course, get sent to me and get paid for by me with help from supportive BOA listeners who make donations. How do you make a donation? How do you help support the site? Simple. You go to Binnall of America, click the PayPal button. That'll take you to PayPal, and they'll walk you through the donation process. No donation is too small, and all donations go towards keeping BOA and BOA audio up and running for all of our great readers and listeners the world over. Heading towards the close now, just one last thing to do here, and that's preview next week's program. We are fortunate enough to be bringing in a bona fide A-list name in the world of esoterica today. He's one of the stars of the History Channel's UFO Hunters, noted author and publisher of UFO Magazine, the illustrious Mr. Bill Burns, will be joining BOA Audio for the first installment of a marathon conversation. We talked for close to 3 hours a couple weeks ago. We're going to be breaking it up in half, so next week will be part 1 with Bill Burns. Great conversation. I had a lot of fun talking to Bill and really just let him run wild with a lot of his answers. In part 1, we're going to have an extended bio background where Bill's going to take us through his evolution in the world of esoterica, how he discovered the Philip Corso story, how he ended up at the helm of UFO Magazine, how UFO Hunters came about, with lots of side roads explored in between. It's really fascinating and some great insight into the behind-the-scenes world of esoterica. Plus, we're going to talk about UFO Hunters in the first half, how Bill feels about being the center of the advertising campaign, how much network input he gets, and how he answers the critics who say that UFO Hunters is not real ufology. We're going to deal with all that in part 1 with Bill Burns of UFO Hunters. And on that note, we have nothing left to say, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you for your patience last week with the voice situation. Luckily, it seems to have passed. We'll be coming at you for the next 6 weeks at least here with more Binnall of America audio. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, folks. This is Tim Binnall, signing off.